this morning that ends with something that has been a familiar theme through the Gospels recently about Jesus inviting little children to him. And again, we are to hear that Jesus is calling us all to have childlike hearts, to be open, to be welcoming, to have the kind of innocence and trust that we know that children often have. The Gospel this morning begins with divorce, talking about how the Pharisees come to Jesus and they're trying to trap him with words and whether he knows the law. Specifically, this is about the law of Moses, saying, what do you think about divorce, Jesus? And Jesus responds by acknowledging that Moses in the law allowed people to divorce, because he says that there is a hardness of heart which we can understand as a separation between people, but that in fact divorce compared to the olden days, now we understand to be more what Jesus was saying, that it's about relationship. And when relationship is broken, that's when we have divorce. So Jesus actually takes the law deeper into being about how God wishes, God wants for us to be one with one another, to be one with creation, to be one with God. Today, we are remembering St. Francis. And Francis he lived about 1200 AD, and he had this incredible yearning for oneness. He yearned for oneness with God and with creation. And what's really interesting about Francis is that he grew up incredibly wealthy. His father was a very, very wealthy man. And Francis gave up all of his material wealth, all of the things, much to his family's distress. And he went out to create, to find this oneness with God in relationship and with all of creatures. So he became very poor. He just took what he could find, and he opened himself in a vulnerability to creation, and he could see that way also was a way to be vulnerable to Jesus Christ. So one of the stories, I think, that encapsulate who Francis was and the kind of openness and connection that we're called to have is a story that Francis was walking along, and he probably had some people with him, but he was walking along a pathway that was going into a big meadow. And the meadow, of course, is a big opening with lots of grass. And Francis had this habit of singing as he walked, which is great. He was singing in French. So you can picture Francis, la-di-da, ooh-la-la, singing in French, walking along. So it's not being quiet. And he walks into this big meadow, and he notices that there are tons of birds in all of the trees surrounding the meadow. Birds of all kinds are there. There are songbirds. There are birds of prey, like raptors, hawks, things like that. All sorts of things. Big birds, small birds, just tons and tons. And they don't leave when he walks into the clearing. And so one of the things that Francis regularly did was bless the creatures he met. And we, as Episcopalians, say it all the time. It'll be very familiar to you. Francis used to say, "The Lord be with you." So Francis said that to all of the birds that are in all of these trees, and he said, "Now I want you to pay attention." And he preached a sermon to the birds. And the sermon that he preached told them that they were really blessed to be so beautifully adorned in such simplicity, because of course all of their feathers and things. And then he told them how wonderful it was that they could find all of the food they needed. They were never hungry, so they could just always find food. And he celebrated with them the independence and the freedom they had, because they had wings that would just take them wherever they wanted to go. And then he told them that God loved them, and that they should rejoice every single day, joyfully celebrating God's love for them and for all of creation. And when he said this, the story goes that all of the birds just flapped their wings wildly and stuck out their necks, but didn't make a sound. All of these birds around. And so then they didn't leave. They're still quiet except for the sounds of the wings. So then Francis was going to continue on his way, and he started to go around the edge of the clearing of the meadow next to the trees. And as he was going by, of course, there are tons of birds. And so his habit, he wore like a robe, a brown robe. It would brush up against some of the birds, and they didn't move. They didn't leave. Francis then went to the end of the clearing, and he dismissed them, and they all flew away. God so much loves all of the creatures of the world, and so loves us. We know that there is nothing that can separate us from the love God has for us. Absolutely nothing. God loves everyone so much. If we can allow that, the knowledge of the love that God has for us, to inform our hearts, to inform our daily lives, that we, like the birds, can celebrate every single day. Enjoy that love. Love one another. Love God. Love all of God's creatures. Amen.
Amen.